0, and that file could not be located. So,
what a coincidence.
well, no coincidence that is.
Another coincidence. In a long pile, a big pile of coincidences.
Right,
NARA itself, what do you recommend for aspiring researchers?
the AARB files, to get some sort of like sense of where to go, because they looked at everything. They looked at all the previous committees, the Warren Commission, the Church Committee, the Pike Committee, Edwards, HSCA, everything. They looked at everything, and they have all the notes there. The best files are the most productive files I've found. I think he was a guy that was seconded from Department of Justice, and that was Ron Haran, and he went through. He was meticulous. He went through all these committees, and particularly if you want to get into the church committee stuff, which is chaotic. And there's a lot of stuff which has gone missing there. And, we talk about missing stuff. I mean, if we had that stuff, it's just like the Holy Grail. I mean, it's just so much stuff missing from there. Key bits of testimony, it's just gone. They can't find it, they can't locate it. All the customs and INS interviews are all gone, all missing. The only bits you can find are the footnotes in the draft reports, where they've talked to customs officers and INS officers, and they quote different pages and the extracts. But coincidentally, all that stuff is gone. Can't find any of it. None of it at all. So, and that ties into 63 again, of course, because if you think about the way the CIA used INS people and customs people, they were used as cutouts, often used as cutouts, and they were co-opted. Cesar Diosdado down in the Keys in Florida, he was a co-opted customs guy, who lied through his teeth to the HSCA. It should have been put in jail, perjury.
And this also ties in with the story you told a couple of years ago at the ARC about the Oswald's Marine Buddies records as well.
Sure,
that were hidden away.
Yeah.
And you went there how many times actually? You went there quite a few
Well,
times.
I was lucky in a sense, and unlucky with the result. But I met Pete Bagley, the former chief of Soviet Russia counterintelligence, and Pete phoned up the former editor of Reader's Digest, Fulton Arsler, and got me access, because everybody had been denied access to box 3, which was the interviews with probably about 100 Marines. The great big cardboard box was like this, and when I first tried to look at that box, I called up the Georgetown Library guy, Scott Taylor, and Scott said, "Oh yeah, come on over." So fine, I go over. And then when I got there, he said, "No, you can't see it. I requested box 3." I said, "Well, I've come all this way. Can you not do anything?" And of course, he called Fulton Arsler up, and Arsler said, "No way." So it was many years later that through this friendship with Pete Bagley, I managed to get Pete phoned up Arsler, and then as soon as he interceded, there was no problem. I could get to see it. So, but when it came out, and we undid the box, which was all sealed up and as dusty as hell, you could see straight away that more than half the box was empty. The stuff had gone. There were no Marine Corps interviews whatsoever. If there's no problem with Oswald in his biography and his identity, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Exactly. It proves actually the opposite.
Yeah.
It shows the opposite.
Yeah. And the only thing in that box was there were the Reader's Digest researchers for Epstein had gone to Belgium, and they tracked various. It was stuff to do with demoralizations. There was a bit of stuff in there to do with demoralizations in that box. But yeah, I mean, that seems to be, you know, every time you get to somewhere which is interesting and you'd like to see the stuff, it ain't there. It's gone.
So you now talk about 2 instances, but are there more instances like that?
I'm trying to recall. Yeah, I mean, the custom stuff was one instance. I don't know. Have to give me a time to think about it. Yeah, there are other instances. But yeah.
Okay. Greg Parker wrote an article called "Anatomy of a Fake Defection," and everybody was forwarded that by email as such. And it was about, I don't know, 10 pages. And of course, especially the program called Redskin. I'm saying it wrong, or is it Red?
Well, there's lots of reds.
Yeah, or Red.
There's red skin,
was the
red socks,
defective
red
program.
cap. Yeah,
Socks.
you name it.
Yeah. What can you tell us about this?
Well, that was run through a component of CIA called SR10. And SR10 was just trying to think of the dates. In 1959, the director of, the chief of SR10 was Paul Gardner, who's an interesting character. And then I think in 60 it was Alexander Sokolov, and then a guy called David Chapchalsky took over in 61, and he was there for a number of years. SR10 utilized students, tourists, people, mainly students, I suppose, to go into the Soviet Union and gather human intelligence. And they were, I can't say they were trained, but they were, you know, heavily briefed. And each one was cleared at quite a high level, right through to up to Richard Helms would have to sign off on each one of those. But what interests me was that there were more levels. I don't think Greg's got to this. There were more levels of the Redskin program. Besides the students, there were a series of, if you've got your pen and paper,
Yeah.
there were a series of contract agents, and these were called the AE Fairways. And then it even looks as though there were CIA staff officers staff people used, which quite surprised me. There was a guy in '64 called, and he may still be alive, and you need to write his name down, called Warren Harshman. And he worked in SR6, but for some reason he was utilized in 1960 as a tour guide by the agency. He went into, and he was traveling to Minsk. So Harshman was a Redskinner. So he may still be around. Maybe you could talk to somebody could talk to the guy.
But let me just.
Red Sox was a program which started very early on.
Yeah.
Or do you want to stick on?
I've got here a memorandum by Richard Bissell, issued in 1959 on the 2nd of September,
Yeah.
titled "Operations Against Soviet Targets." The operations listed were Red Cap, Red Sox, and Red Skin. Red Cap and Red Sox were conceived during Frank Wisen's watch as head of the Directorate of Plans. Their inclusion in the Bissell memo is most interesting in that those programs had been aimed solely at Soviet satellites and were derived out of the failing Volunteer Freedom Corps. Immigrants from Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and Romania were trained at a base just outside Munich with the aim of infiltrating them into the satellites at the optimum moment to foment or aid national uprisings
It was an absolute disaster.
against Soviet rule. The failed 1956 uprising in Hungary caused these operations to be deep sixed, along with the Eisenhower policy of rollback. But the National Security Council, the NSC, resolution which gave birth to them, NSC 143/2, was not rescinded until late December 1960. The Bissell memo opens by stating, "The effort of clandestine services against the Soviets will be increased and expanded. This demands a coordinated clandestine attack by all operating elements of the CS which have operational opportunities.
Or CIA speak.
Yeah.
No. That's actually very clear, but I mean, if you go into the handbooks, it's arcane. So Red Sox, yeah, Red Sox was, I thought it was maybe just even a little bit earlier. Conceived maybe by Wisner, but it was talked about much even at an earlier date, because Arnold Silver was a very fine counterintelligence staff guy, staff officer, and he wrote a report on the projected Red Sox program, in which he completely warned against doing it, because the Soviet internal controls were so complete. It was bound to be a doomed enterprise. You could never do it. And that's exactly what they found. All these people went into the Soviet Union in black, what they call black, and they were all picked up. They were all picked up. Either killed or captured.
All right, and then there's Russell Langell. Langell was a CIA officer working on the cover of embassy security. He was arrested by the Soviets after being caught with notes obtained from an inside agent he had been running. Langell was interviewed at CIA headquarters by two staff counsel of the HSCA. Notes of that interview, taken down by Robert Gensman, include the following illuminating comments. Langell joined the CIA in 1950 and worked mainly in SR9 of the Soviet-Russian division. In November 1955, he resigned from the agency on the pretext that he was disgruntled with his assignments.
Yep.
His CIA file would have reflected his this termination of employment.
Yep.
The only document to the contrary would have been a memorandum from the Director of Central Intelligence stating that Langell would retain all rights when he returned to the CIA. And thirdly, in March of '56, he started to work on the cover of the State Department as a security officer. After a stint at the Vienna embassy, he commenced at the Moscow embassy in December '57. Outside the embassy were Jean Lieberman and one other whose name was redacted. Additionally, there were 3 or 4 students who handled orientation projects. And then it says in his article, basically by Greg, it says, I don't know for certain what meaning the CIA gives to the word orientation, but the ordinary meaning of the word suggests getting people used to new surroundings, customs, etc., indicating the role maybe have included briefing others on their mission.
A heavy briefing for the task ahead, I would say.
Yeah.
A heavy briefing.
The question was Edward Keenan one of those students, and if so, was he perhaps in Snyder's office that day in order to brief Oswald on such matters?
Well, Snyder's a case as well. I mean, I must admit, Keenan went right by me. It wasn't until I think somebody pointed out this, the fact that it was in John Newman's book. I missed it. It had gone right by me. But I know Keenan figures in the William Martin NSA defector file. I've seen references to Keenan in there. Although the references are that he didn't actually, the ones I've seen, that he didn't actually meet Martin. And I'm sure I've seen somewhere that Greg seems to think that he did meet Martin. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's either, it could be the CIA lying to itself, who knows. But
That wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first time. But one of the cables I saw was, it said that Keenan saw Martin in the company of, and I always get the lady's name wrong, Tatiana Chicheknika. You know, it's one of these weird Soviet names.
Mm.
So, in other words, that they were saying that he never actually met with Martin.
Okay, and then with regard to the Bissell memo, actually 2 days later, Oswald was transferred to the H&H squadron, and he applied for his passport that same day. And that was just 2 days after Bissell issued his memo advising of the expansion of Soviet operations, which grew out of NSC 143/2. On January the 4th, 1961, Oswald expressed his thoughts of returning to the United States, and on February 13th, 61, he notified the U.S. Embassy of his wish. of his wish. The change of heart about staying was within a mere week or so of the NFC 143/2 being countermanded, with the first steps toward actual repatriation only a few more weeks after that. That the HSCA could look into the possibility of Oswald having been an agent sent to the Soviet Union by the SR division of the Directorate of Plans and decide that there was nothing to indicate that this has been the case is worrisome. His finding seems to have been based primarily on the testimony of CIA officers and its own extremely narrow readings of documents. It is to be hoped that any future investigation will not be so easily thrown off by smug reassurances, nor willfully ignore the full significance of the document excesses.
Well, the people that had their hands on Oswald, in my opinion, were Angleton and his group, and Soley and his group. They asked for the documents on Oswald as they came in. They must have asked those pre-defection, so they were the people with their hands on it. They had pre-knowledge, but you have to try and work out what was that, what was their intent. What were they going to use Oswald for? There's no question in my mind that you can't make a major change in dissemination. There has to be a good reason.
Okay. Anyone have any questions?
Well, Malcolm, next year is a very significant year, as you know, that the unreleased documents in the JFK, as a result of the JFK Act. Do you have any? Are you optimistic about what's going to come out, or do you think it's going to be just another? Because they have an option. They've got a option where they can say,
I'm
well,
optimistic, but I'm pretty certain that the CIA are going to appeal to the president, whoever that president is. Bit of luck, it might be Trump.
well, that's another follow-up question. Do you think, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but my opinion, President Clinton is going to be more amiable to opening this thing up? Neither do I.
I haven't got too much confidence in the Clintons.
So you're not going to get leadership, not get anybody in the leadership authority to say it's about time we sorted this thing out. Can you ever see that happening? Can you ever see the political climate occurring where that's going to happen?
I think you would get it if Sanders was elected.
But one point.
Well,
One point is that Clinton himself, Bill Clinton, has said that he believes there was a conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination. He said that when campaigning in 1992. He and Gore were both interviewed, and they were asked, did they believe that JFK had been murdered by a conspiracy? And Clinton said, well, I'll leave that to Al to answer. And Gore then said wholeheartedly that he believed that there had been a conspiracy. And at the end of it, Clinton said, oh, he speaks for me as well. So presumably he's Clinton, whether he was being honest or not, but we don't know.
Words, not deeds, not words.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And I always remember the interview that he did on one, I forget which one it was. Was it the fifth one? There must have been the one before, the one big one before, where there was an interview that some news guy pushed a microphone in his face and said, do you believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? And he just repeated back the words almost, but it was the way he repeated the words back. He said, I believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted, great long pause, alone. In other words, the emphasis was on acted. He was playing a role. So that was a pretty neat trick.
Well, bear in mind that Blair used to copy Clinton, so we all know. Yeah.
Lest we forget that Hillary Clinton, which was Hillary Rodham, got kicked off helping the HSCA for fraud and cheating, etc. I don't think that's a really good record when she started her career.
Yeah, there was some follow-on too. I don't know if I can say that. We've got time for
Yeah, go on.
the follow-on with, you know, what Greg said. They weren't really questions. They were more like comments. The one thing was where we're going to get more information on, I think, in 2017 is the IRC and Leo Chern, whose pseudonym was, he was a CIA asset, and his pseudonym was Bruce Mastrocola. There's a lot more material to come out of the IRC, which I'm sure we're going to find interesting. The other thing was what he talked about Ferry, and you know the
Recruitment of Oswald for
recruitment
the
of
junior
Oswald.
CIP.
That struck a chord with me because when I met Fred Reeves, that was the guy that did the post-defection investigation of Oswald in '59. You know, the one that never happened. But Fred Reeves did that investigation, and I met him at the National Archives when he was searching for his own records without success. And we kept in touch afterwards. We corresponded and often phoned each other. And the one thing that struck me was he always wanted information on David Ferry and the New Orleans angle and the CAP. Although he was very closed-mouthed about the subject of his own investigation, you know, the only thing I could ever get out of him was a lot of information came in from Japan. An enormous amount of information on Oswald came from Japan. Not so much within the US, the mainland US, but from Japan, which I thought that was quite interesting. But then this interest in Oswald and the CP, which went on for weeks, months, you know, over a year, looking at anything I could get on David Ferry. That sort of like touched a nerve. I mean, was part of his investigation, or did that investigation touch on the CAP? Why would he be so interested in that bit? Just that bit. Nothing else. Just that bit.